Welcome back to Rise, a 4-part Black History Month educational series. This week, we'll be discussing what's on the horizon for historically Black colleges and universities. Not since the 90s, when NBC birthed a sitcom centered around the HBCU experience called A Different World, has there been such an interest in historically Black colleges and universities as there is now. So what's next for our nation's HBCUs?
Lift every voice and sing.
What is Black excellence? Is it something that can be confined within 28 days of the year? Is it something that starts and stops? Or is it more of an enduring quality? Can it be limited to just one type of person or to one particular race? Well, the answer to that question is no. However, it is within the context of Blackness that excellence takes on a higher meaning. Now, I know, the philosophy of Cat Williams tells us that excellence is already excellent. How you gonna out-excellence excellence? It's just excellent.
I don't know how you go out fantastic.
But when it comes to Black excellence, it is excellence that has risen after being cast down.
You can shoot me with your words. You can cut me with your lies. You can kill me with your hatefulness. But just like life, I rise.
As Grandma used to say, when it comes to Black excellence, you can get mad or you can get glad.
Black excellence is an all-time high.
But don't get mad because I'm glad.
Black excellence is still at an all-time high.
And sure, it's Black History Month, traditionally a time when we look back and celebrate our heritage and our heroes.
A black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling and bearing in the tide.
But truthfully, to find Black excellence, we don't necessarily have to journey back to last century.
Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the hope and the dream of the slave.
Simply looking at last month reveals endless examples of excellence in action.
There I go.
I went back to get what I needed in order to achieve what I wanted. And I think of the many young Black women who go through that and are devastated by it, and it kills their dream. I was not going to let that happen.
Being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated.
True to our native land, true to our native land.
Breaking news, Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden has made his choice.
Tonight, for the first time in our nation's history, a Black woman is on the ticket.
When Joe Biden announced Senator Kamala Harris would be his running mate, alumni and students from the nation's historically Black colleges and universities rejoiced.
Family is my beloved Alpha Kappa Alpha. our Divine Nine, and my HBCU brothers and sisters.
The level that Black people across this nation identify with the first Black woman vice president in U.S. history varies by generation. To alumni and supporters who for years have faced questions of how relevant HBCUs are, Harris's Place represents the fulfillment of the mission of Black institutions of higher learning.
When you attend an HBCU, it really is about being in an environment where everything tells you you can be whatever you choose to be.
Her announcement also brings to point the vital idea that there needs to be a better understanding of assets in majority Black cities, schools, and communities.
So Joe and I have a commitment that includes $70 billion going to HBCUs and MSIs, minority serving institutions, to basically lower the cost and improve the quality of the environment in terms of the resources that are needed. Part of our plan also includes $20 billion going to our HBCUs for infrastructure upgrades.
This plan that Joe Biden is offering around dealing with racial disparity is a very important step because he's acknowledging that equity has to be part of the priority.
If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free.
That's helpful.
And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000.
Historically, Black colleges and universities aren't only great places for people to get an education. They provide a foundation for population growth and economic development. A case can certainly be made that HBCUs are competitive assets, well worth the investment. And like other PWIs, HBCUs can leverage specialized degree programs to support local economies.
Historically and currently, HBCUs produce 50% of Black teachers. We know that we have not only a responsibility but a duty to make sure that we support our teachers in every way, because of course they are doing the most noble work one could do professionally, which is to teach the children. So part of what Joe and I have planned is that we will increase teacher pay by tripling Title I funding. And Title I funding is basically funding that goes to low-income school districts. In addition, our plan is to invest $5 billion at HBCUs and minority-serving institutions for graduate programs in teaching and healthcare and STEM that will build entrepreneur programs and internship programs and develop pipelines for people to have career success.
Consider the potential of towns that house or are adjacent to HBCUs. HBCUs can be a significant support in an economic and workforce development strategy for city sustainability and growth.
We have to support our HBCUs historically and currently. They are the pipeline to brilliant Black minds who go on to be leaders of our nation and internationally leaders of the world.
A mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in.
Well, I think this is an exciting era, an exciting period for HBCUs. I think HBCUs are experiencing a bit of a resurgence right now. We're seeing from a statistical standpoint, that more African Americans are starting to attend HBCUs. And there's something about the climate in which we are in that people have begun to see, man, HBCUs, it's a safe space for Black folks. We have a wonderful history and a wonderful legacy. But I think even members of the white community are beginning to see it's also important that we have strong HBCUs as well.
I think we went through a period in which when what we would call traditionally white institutions decided that they were going to recruit African American students, there was a decrease in terms of number of African American students in HBCUs. That trend over the last maybe 3 to 5 years has reversed itself, and enrollment is increasing at HBCUs and as we go into the future.
I've taught at 2 HBCUs, and one of the things we do is we understand that the public school system generally does not prepare African Americans for college. If you look at the retention rates among African American students at predominantly white institutions, the data is alarming. Okay, now if you can cut the mustard, you're fine. But if you cannot, they'll cut you off.
Coming out of school today,
I probably would have never gone to a big school because I wasn't ready. I mean, to go to an Alabama, which is right there in Tuscaloosa, some of the same kids I competed against, beat them. But back then, Alabama didn't want me. And they didn't want me not because I wasn't a great athlete. They didn't want me because I lived in McKenzie Court, the projects over there. And they didn't know what I would bring to them. They did have black athletes, but they didn't come from the city. So options for me back then in the mid 70s were limited.
Now, what HBCUs do, we don't accept that there's an intellectual deficiency with black kids.
We got scholarships to go to Norfolk State, and was somewhere I'd never been before. My buddy and I took a bus ride all the way, and we're a long way from home. But going to an HBCU, it's like going to an extended family where they really took care of us. They made sure we got the things that we needed. And fortunately, became pretty good athletes there.
Okay, but we also recognize that the system has failed them. So we're going to do some extra work that probably doesn't happen in other spaces so that we can catch them up while simultaneously teaching them the disciplines.
Because at HBCUs, they take a different interest in students that come there. They know that it's an environment for learning, but also for growing as individuals. One of the good things about the basketball coach was also our counselor. And so he told me, he said, look, since they don't have pre-med, we're going to put you in the chemistry department. So here I am, an athlete playing football, basketball, and running track, and also majoring in chemistry. Couldn't have done that at a major college today. It was things that they did to support me growing.
When you talk to an HBCU graduate, which I am not, and some days I wish I had been, is that they went into an environment, into a school where, most schools will, as it relates to student and student performance and student production and all of that, places a lot of the responsibility on the students, which it should do. But it's always helpful to have someone who's there, who cares, who encourages you, who monitors what you want to do.
Well, that's Charles O, as we called him. He was the guy that every athlete had to go through if they want to change their major. I went to him and said, look, I want to change and go into nursing. And he looked at me and he said, no, we promised your grandmother that we're going to get you prepared to go to med school. Or if you decide you're not going to go, you have a degree that you can use immediately. Well, fast forward, I did take the MCAT, and I ended up getting drafted in the third round the same week I graduated. So med school kind of got put on the back burner.
It has an environment that embraces you, pulls you in, encourages you, supports you, holds your hand as you go through the process of education. And if you want, and the only way you fail is that you want to fail and you intentionally not accept what the institution is having to offer.
It was a school to go to learn to be a man, to grow up. And I'm just so thankful that I got that opportunity.
I think it's essential for the entire city, the political leadership, corporate leadership to recognize the jewel that we have in Simmons College, not only in terms of educating students, but also in terms of creating and generating economic development in our city.
Last summer, during the height of protests that were raged all across the United States of America, leaders in the city of Louisville approached our president, Dr. Kevin Cosby, and they asked what could they do. And one of the things Dr. Cosby thought would be helpful is if people would take some time to learn about Black issues, because only about 8% of what gets taught in the curriculum in most public schools address Black issues. And so there's a huge gap. And when you have that kind of gap, that's the reason not only do you have these sort of systemic inequities, but you have people who don't understand what African Americans face.
When you look back to 2020 and sort of the whole civil unrest that was taking part across the country, there was a reckoning in this country. I think, and a lot of middle-aged and younger non-Black folks came to the realization that they needed to do something different. And so the discussion has changed in terms of the focus and what is going on.
And so we decided to offer a class on the radical Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One of the real benefits of the Radical King course is that it demonstrates the importance of HBCUs. Not only do we educate our students, but Simmons College of Kentucky is an educational resource for the city of Louisville, the state of Kentucky, and the broader region. And it was an exciting class. We had of leaders all over the country, and they were blown away to hear Black intellectual discourse at such a sophisticated level. So not only did they understand Dr. King through a new lens, talking about issues in the 50s and 60s, these are the same issues we are dealing with today.
One of the distinctives of HBCUs is that HBCUs create in students a consciousness for their community. So we want our students to be smart, but we want our students to be socially responsible and socially engaged in the critical issues that affect the Black community. Conscious awakening classes and conscience awakening events for the purpose of creating students who are agents of change and who are seeking to transform our city, state, and nation.
And it's not only having a social consciousness, but it's being able to act on that social consciousness. And HBCUs bring that to the communities within which they reside.
You know what? We tend to, as Blacks, leave our personalities in the car when we go in to the boardroom or go into a meeting. Yeah, I try to bring Earl Jones in with me because I think it's an asset. I don't think Earl Jones left in the car I'm a shell of what I am without bringing my personality, without bringing my Blackness, without bringing my background, being poor and having to work twice as hard to get opportunities. I can't leave that in the car. I got to bring that in with me.
We develop leaders.
You represent who I am, who I have been, and who I can be.
Change agents.
Keeping the spirit of activism and engagement alive and well.
That ignite their communities.
A community of achievement, one that will demand much of you.
And change the world.
He set out to do it, and to do it well.
We produce 80% of all Black doctors and dentists. We generate the Black middle class.
Strong enough to support the weight of whatever you could dream.
We provide a sense of belonging, a celebration of our unique culture.
That is the magic of this place. Almost anything can happen here.
We are the pipeline that produced many of America's Black first.
But its mission has been to ensure those firsts were not the last.
The nation's VP-elect is a product of this distinct heritage.
When you attend an HBCU, there is nothing you can't do.
We are America's historically Black colleges and universities.
Hey! Hey, hey, hey!
And we're proud to be Louisville's only HBCU, Simmons College of Kentucky.
Maybe you have been chosen for such a time as this.
Visit SimmonsCollegeKY.edu or text ADMIT to 55444. We are Louisville's HBCU.
The future of Simmons, it's the gift that keeps on giving, because the more we invest in Simmons, the more we're going to see a return in the investment. You know, many instances when people think about supporting Black institutions, they think, well, it's charity. I'm doing something benevolent or altruistic. I think we need to move beyond the motivation being altruism. It should be investment. When you invest in Simmons, you're investing in the future of our city.
Because the legacy of HBCUs is doing more with less. But we need to abandon that paradigm, and we need to give HBCUs an opportunity to compete on the same scale and in the same way as our peer institutions that are predominantly white.
You're talking about the overall level of education or educational attainment in the community gets raised. And so when that gets raised, the intellectual curiosity of the community gets raised. And all of that flows down to generations to the young people who are in fact in those communities. So it is an opportunity to really have an overall economic impact that ripples throughout the community.
You know, sometimes members of the philanthropic community tend to look at HBCUs a little differently than they do predominantly white institutions. And I think that's a paradigm that really needs to change. If you study the history and look at the data, HBCUs are more effective at graduating African-American students and feeding the Black middle class than predominantly white institutions. So, I mean, the data would tell you that. Just look at the Thurgood Marshall Fund.
When you invest in human capital, there is nothing better than that. You know, what we seek always is to create a group of individuals who will be able to be lifelong contributors to the community within which they reside. So when you consider that, if you look at an individual, and this data is pretty old, is that over the lifetime of a college graduate, that individual will earn probably in excess of $1 million in terms of most jobs. That's with a college degree. If you look at a high school dropout, you're probably talking about them earning something less than a couple of $100,000 over the course of their lifetime. And of course, a high school graduate is more. When you look at those dynamics in terms of what happens when the individual is educated and fully and completely educated, you see what they're able to contribute back to society through their productive capacity and their skills in terms of what they do.
I mean, you are literally opening up doors for young people to walk into. But not only are you doing that, you're also doing some important hard work of correcting injustices from the past, where institutions have been marginalized, disenfranchised, and shut out and not been given the same opportunities other institutions have been given all along. So you're making an investment and you're actually doing the right thing. And so I hope we'll shift our thinking about HBCUs to approach the sort of language of investment.
Across the country, every city that has an HBCU has a vibrant Black middle class. And that Black middle class brings to that community not only economic power in terms of what they do, but also they influence the social, legislative, and behavioral in terms of what takes place in those communities.
So just think for a moment. Hundreds of African Americans, these graduates start to stay in our community, work in our community, build up our community. The city begins to take on a different face, a different spirit.
The vibrant middle class is what drives a lot of the economics in terms of a community. So the better educated the individuals in your community are, the more productive, the more power, more economics they create for the community. And that's what you're looking to happen with HBCU. So these institutions aren't necessarily looking for a handout as much as they're looking for a hand up. And when they look for that hand up, they're looking to produce and provide back to the community individuals who can be productive, tax-paying, contributing individuals who make life better in their community, not only for themselves, but for everybody around them as well.
On behalf of Simmons Nation, I would like to thank Kentucky Lottery Corporation for sponsoring these wonderful episodes on Simmons College of Kentucky. History is so critically important, and to know the history of Simmons is to know the potential that is in all of us, the resiliency of an institution that just refused to close its doors. And I want to thank Kentucky Lottery for helping to sponsor this, and also for the key scholarship money that so many Simmons students have been able to access. And I want to thank you also for watching the Simmons story. And I want to encourage you that regardless of what institution you may have graduated from, that you would consider making Simmons a part of your budget, and that you would think about the possibility of maybe volunteering at Simmons. Become a part of Simmons Nation, because as Simmons goes up, our entire city goes up. Thank you again so much for being a part of this wonderful experience as we've been able to share the wonderful saga of Simmons College of Kentucky.
Hello, I'm Mary Harville, President and CEO of the Kentucky Lottery Corporation. We are so proud to be able, for the first time, to partner with Simmons College of Kentucky for this virtual lecture series celebrating Black History Month. We at the Kentucky Lottery are your neighbors here in Louisville, located at the entry of Portland, not far from the Simmons campus. Simmons, founded in 1879, is very much a part of the fabric of our community by providing educational opportunities, and we at the Kentucky Lottery also work to serve that purpose. Black history is not just something reserved for February. It's celebrated through our friends, our neighbors, and our community that embraces diversity every day. This rich history embodies what our country strives to be, and this richness and diversity are what makes America and American history so unique. Although most of you probably know the Kentucky Lottery for our scratch-off tickets or big Powerball or Mega Millions jackpots, and both of them have been pretty big lately, promoting education and workforce development in Kentucky is at the heart of what we do. In 1999, members of the Kentucky General Assembly dedicated Kentucky Lottery proceeds to funding college scholarship and grant programs. Since then, the largest portion of our proceeds, more than $3.8 billion, have gone to fund programs specifically to help Kentucky students attend college. Just last year, more than 120 Simmons students were able to use $165,000 to attend Louisville's HBCU. Nearly 600 students have been able to use more than $750,000 to pursue their degrees at Simmons. We take great pride in these numbers. To put all this in perspective, 95 cents of every dollar of non-loan college student financial aid awarded in Kentucky comes straight from Kentucky Lottery proceeds. This economic investment adds to the prosperity of our community as a whole. And in the past 21 years, 1 out of every 5 Kentuckians has received a college scholarship or grant paid for by the Kentucky Lottery. We're proud to stand with Simmons College of Kentucky, recognize Black History Month, and the contributions of HBCUs. We appreciate the opportunity to help bring this lecture series to you. Today, we know Kentucky's most deserving students are counting on us, and our mission of fueling imagination and funding education is more important now than ever. Thank you.